I'm here, aptly enough, overlooked by a portrait of William III in Wadham's Old Library with Sophie Aldred. Sophie completed her undergraduate studies at Wadham College and is now embarked upon a doctorate on reading practices in the 17th century at Worcester College. We've previously discussed the context in which the broadsides that have been given to Wadham were produced, and we've also talked about the ways in which they were produced. I want to turn now to consider the ways in which they may have been read. Sophie, I wonder, could we start just by thinking about what we might say in general about reading practices in the 17th century?
Yes, certainly, and thanks for having me. So, there are a number of aspects of reading practices in the 17th century that are very different from how we might think of reading today. First off, and very importantly in terms of our broadsides, reading was not a practice that people did alone. So there was no sneaking off with a book to read in silence, but they read in groups. So people would sit in front of the fireplace, court, or stand over a desk and discuss works as they went along. This is quite interesting. So in a number of old books, you have metaphors for sound rather than for sight. It's not as you have seen or as you have read, but as you will have heard. So this indicates the assumption actually that lots of books would have been shared, or broadsides will have been shared orally afterwards, so people will have taken them out of context and discussed them in lots of different ways. So this ties to the second component of reading practices, which is that they were active. Readers were not passive receptacles of knowledge who took the author's word as it stood. They challenged this and contested it, writing comments in the margins or even crossing out paragraphs. I've actually seen a number of books where they've entirely cut up the chapters and put it together in an order that they thought was more conducive to the author's point. This is usually because reading was envisioned or inflected by an outcome envisioned beyond the text itself. So readers read for purpose or a particular activity. This might have been in order to memorize moral lessons to impart to your family or friends, or to verify particular political lines of action. It might even just have been to sort of select or memorize pithy quotations so you could make yourself seem particularly learned. Originality wasn't necessarily prized in this context.
Thank you very much. Now, the broadsides we have in the library collection are pristine, but you've laid out for us some other books from Wadham Library which give us a sense of how people read in the period.
Yes, I have. So this first book is a commonplace book that demonstrates quite nicely this principle of reading for action that I was just talking about. This was compiled by a student, Henry Croke, in sort of 1650s, 1660s. And as you can see here, he's copied out various passages from the Enchiridion of Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, and sort of taken little moral lessons that are going to be useful for him in his later life. As you can sort of see as we continue through the book, he's not just taken the passages, going through, but reorganized them. And that's because students at this time were encouraged to dissect the work and reorganize it, both as an aid for memory, they want to remember the lessons that these ancient philosophers taught us, but also so they could use particularly pleasant little sentences and pepper their own work with this. In this second book of homilies, you can see something of the process by which commonplace books came about. Can you see how the author has sort of commented on and written the primary points from each passage? This is, again, an aid to memory, but also shows the process by which books were sort of reimagined and re-articulated. What the reader thought was important in a text was not necessarily what the author thought was the most important part. Here on folio 10, if we get to that as well, you also see the reader, you also see the reader challenging somewhat, or at least writing their own thoughts, prompted by the page. So this is actually upside down. Focus on words and not of deeds is like a garden filled with weeds. So, I'm not sure what to think about that. This copy indicates the reader renumbering the different sermons and coming up with a makeshift index to show what they thought was important in the work. it suggests how, rather than reading a book cover to cover, they chopped and changed and selected essentially what was important to them. This book was actually owned by the Bishop of Worcester, or his son, the Archdeacon of Worcester. And we get a sense in their writing out what they thought was significant in the sermons, how they might have put this together for their own congregations to preach in front of an audience of however many hundreds of people. If we turn to the back of the book, however, we note or have a way of seeing that these were not just objects of learning, but material objects too. I'm not sure that the Bishop of Worcester would have liked his congregations to see his pretty little drawing of a skull, assuming he was the one who drew that, of course. This sort of reminds us that actually paper and your opportunities to develop one's artistic skills was very limited.
Here, under the gaze of Charles I, it's tempting to conclude by drawing up parallels between what we have heard in our own age. The 17th century witnessed a constitutional crisis in which the widespread dissemination of misinformation fed an increasingly paranoid political scene. However, to search for such direct comparisons is rarely wise. The claim that history repeats itself quickly becomes platitudinous. Instead, we might more simply think that what is so deplorable about the modern world is not novel and has its roots in England's troubled 17th century.